Here's a book by Stephen Meyer, who has a PhD from Cambridge University, and it is a weighty book entitled Signature in the Cell, DNA and the Evidence for Intelligent Design. Here's another book by a man by the name of David Berlinski. He has a PhD from Princeton. He's a secular Jew. He's not a believing Christian. But in this book called The Devil's Delusion, he talks about how science hasn't proven that God doesn't exist, can't even come close. Here's another book by Philip Johnson, a Harvard-educated lawyer who clerked for the Supreme Court, entitled Darwin on Trial, where he just repudiates Darwinian theory. Here's a book by Michael Behe, who is a biochemist at Lehigh University, entitled Darwin's Black Box. It's a scathing denunciation of Darwinian theory. Here's a book by Lee Strobel entitled The Case for the Creator, where he interviews some of these and many other scholars who doubt Darwinian theory. Here's a book by one of our own Calvary members, Dr. Tom Woodward, who has a PhD and an undergraduate degree from Princeton University. This book is called Darwin Strikes Back. He's written another one called Doubts About Darwin, where he outlines how so many scholars question Darwinian theory today. Here's another book by that same man, Dr. Woodward, along with Dr. James Gills, a world-renowned physician and frequent Calvary attender. And they've written a book together entitled Darwinism Under the Microscope. Now, the reason I show you all those books is simply this. I want you to know there are hundreds, there are thousands of learned scholars who, having heard Darwinian theory, they question it. These are not preachers. Most of them are not theologians. Some of those people are not even believing Christians. But these scientists, these physicians, look at Darwinian theory and says, you know what? It just doesn't hold water because it can't tell you how life began. In Michael Behe's book that I just showed you, Darwin's Black Box, he argues for a concept he calls irreducible complexity. And what he does is he demonstrates how inside our body, DNA, inside the cells, there are irreducibly complex machines that defy Darwinism, naturalistic evolution, the belief that these things could have just happened over time through random mutation and small successive changes. What he argues is that these are complex machines, far more complex than Darwin could have ever dreamed, and they can't simply have evolved through gradual, successive, small changes. These machines have many moving parts, and they have to all work together or it doesn't work at all. Take, for instance, the complexity of the eye. The eye is a highly complex organ, as Darwin himself acknowledged. In fact, here is a famous quote from Charles Darwin. He said, "To suppose that the eye, with all its inimitable contrivances for adjusting the focus to different distances, for admitting different amounts of light, and for the correction of spherical and chromatic aberration, could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree." Now, when you think about the eye, it's more complex than even Darwin knew. I mean, it's more complex than most scientists understood just a few decades ago. When light hits the retina, a photon interacts with a molecule which rearranges within picoseconds. Now, a picosecond is about the time it takes for light to travel the breadth of a single hair. Now, if you're like me, you hear that and you think, okay, that really clears that up. It's fast. A myriad of chemical reactions then occur. Each reaction must happen before the next one happens. And if they don't all happen, it just doesn't work. The complexity is mind-boggling. And Behe notes that they must all happen for sight to occur. So how did they evolve gradually if everything must happen at once for the organ to work at all? It defies evolutionary thought. This is what Charles Darwin said. If it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous, successive, slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down. And there are thousands of scientists today who believe that is exactly what has happened. Behe writes, in the face of the enormous complexity that modern biochemistry has uncovered in the cell, the scientific community is paralyzed. No one at Harvard University, no one at the National Institutes of Health, no member of the National Academy of Sciences, no Nobel Prize winner, no one at all can give a detailed account of how vision or blood clotting or any complex biochemical process might have developed in a Darwinian fashion. But we're here. Plants and animals are here. The complex systems are here. All these things got here somehow. If not in a Darwinian fashion, then how? You see, the origin of life, how life actually began, really comes down to a matter of faith. As I've already said, you either accept by faith that something came out of nothing, which is an utterly irrational and unscientific concept, or you have to accept that something came from something else. And that's where the Bible steps in. That's where faith steps in and says that something else is a creator. That something else is God. Now, science can't prove God, but it can't disprove God either. Faith is a choice that you make. Either way, you have to choose what you believe. In Hebrews chapter 11, the first two verses say this: "Now faith is being sure of what we hope for and certain of what we do not see." Now, we're going to have some great conversations in your group because the things we've talked about are some controversial topics. People have strong opinions. You read about these in the newspaper and see them in the news media. And the reason they're so animated and passionate is because so much is at stake. Why the conflict between science and the Bible? My answer is, I don't think there is a conflict between science and the Bible. I think if you look at the evidence, you will see that there is ample room for you to choose to believe in God, and that any other choice just doesn't make sense. I want to encourage you to keep an open mind. Examine the evidence for yourself, and while we respect each other's opinions, I hope you have a great conversation tonight.